This is the Pearls of Wisdom, a 3rd edition. My first Pearls of Wisdom deck was the 2nd edition, which I've passed along. It was, if I remember correctly, it was published and distributed by 7th House or something along that line. That distributing company, in fact, when I bought the deck from them a year and a half to 2 years ago, apparently I later found out they no longer have distributing right. So apparently the creator, Roxi Sim, have had some real difficulty with that particular publishing house, which is really unfortunate. She now produces her own deck through GameCrafter, which is where I got this set from. This is the handbook or the booklet, and the 2nd edition is smaller, but the cardstock's thicker, it's glossier, but the resolution of the picture is less clear, is less crisp. The lamination was a little fragile as well, because the edges begin to chip and fray quite quickly, even though I hadn't used it very often. But so this is a much improvement, other than the cardstock is thin, but it is typical GameCrafter cardstock. Is very much made to be riffle shuffled, I suppose, because they I suppose GameCrafter, by the name itself, you would have guessed that if their cardstock is for riffle shuffling, and if their cardstock isn't the sort that you often see with independently made decks these days. Also, it's bigger. Initially, I think their sizes are about this size. And so this one is a lot bigger like that. And so because I shuffle overhand, sort of like that, I tend to prefer thicker cardstock, but the availability of the jumbo size, this one extra large with the crisp resolution, because as you can see, the art is very complex, very rich. That in itself to me is a much improved, made it a much improved deck in my opinion. So as you can see, it's very big, so it's huge. That's the, I'm going to review this later, but that's poker size like that. And so that's quite big. She made available poker size as well as jumbo size, which is extra large. I picked extra large because of the nature of her art is quite complex. And my first deck of the Pearls of Wisdom is the 2nd edition. I have since sold it. This was misplaced because I don't know what happened. I was moving around, or I was using one deck and using another deck's handbook, and then using this handbook for another deck. If you recall from my other videos, I use one handbook from one deck and I crisscross decks and handbooks. So this got separated from the deck, and so when the deck was exchanged or traded off for something else, this was nowhere to be found. And after the trade was done, I discovered this. But this is the 2nd edition, is about this big, and so but the resolution isn't as sharp. And this was produced by, I believe it's called 7th House. But when I bought this 2 years ago or so, the 7th House apparently no longer actually have distributing right from Roxi Sim. So when I purchased this, I didn't know that. Afterwards, I realized that at the time of my purchase, 7th House actually no longer have distributing rights. But having said that, I do not know the particular of the story. It could be that they have the right to sell whatever remains in their inventory. I don't know. But I actually prefer this book because, as you can see, color-coded, and then also with each card, it listed the symbolism that she used. Let me turn my light on. So there is the gladiolas, the garlic, ivy, lion, the spiral belly, for example. It listed it like that. But that's the 2nd edition. The 3rd edition come in a 3 package, bronze, silver, and gold. I bought the bronze, which is the basic package. It comes in a bag like this. It comes with this and that deck in a box, like a big box, like sort of a top on top like that, lid on off like this, and a nice with this picture on it. So it's a nice box, but it contains basically this and the book. And so I found it easier to just store the deck in a wrap because it saves some space. But I like the box. The box is quite nice. If you can store it, in the box and then slip the box in your bookshelf like that. So compared to the sizes like that, you can tell even from this that it was glossy like this as well, the card of the second edition. The third edition, as you can see there, is more matte. However, the card is thinner, and it's because it's through Game Crafter. I think Game Crafter predictably cater for gaming cards, and so they are mainly, I am assuming, for poker and such, they are mainly riffle shuffled, right? So most people do that, and so this would be heaven for riffle shuffler. Let me try this. I am not a riffle shuffler. But you see, because it's big, it's quite tricky. Let me see. It's quite tricky because it's big like that. Yeah, it's very, but if you have a big hand, it's wonderful to riffle shuffle because it's that kind of thickness. But I can't do it like that. I can, but it's a strain, so I do the shuffling like this. And Game Crafter, if you can, like my upcoming review of this deck by Duck Soup, you can see there, if I'm not quite sure if you can see there, you can almost see as if the ink is sitting on top of the paper. So that's typically Game Crafter's production. It's as opposed to, say, the linen cardstock that you obtain from Printer Studio in Hong Kong. So, with Printer Studio, the ink feels or look like it sank into the paper, while Game Crafter tend to have this sort of effect where you feel like the ink is frozen on top of the paper. But it's not a big deal. Just to show you, and I'm going to show you quickly. Just flip through. So the art is not for everyone. That's the fool. The art isn't for everyone, but it's so rich, and I really like it. And I don't do big spreads for this, and perhaps predictably so. I tend to do maybe 3-card spread, and that's it. This feels to me like the sort like the Mary L, but on a different spectrum of intensity, or in terms of the Mary L is very esoteric. It's very high up there. This is very down to earth, but as complex. It is something that you want to sit with for a really long time. If I understand or remember correctly, Roxi Sim lost her son and was diagnosed with a really a severe illness, and then I think she lost either her mother or mother-in-law, or one of the parents anyway, within a very short period of times. So a chronic or a very heavy illness, I can't remember the details, a loss of a son and a loss of a parent, all within a very short span of time. And she predictably was a little shattered, and this deck came out as a result of that. And look at the devil. I quite like. I think I've mentioned before that the first thing I would look for, even from the very beginning of my journey with tarot, is the devil, death. Those are the 2 cards I would see first, and judgment as well, I would like to point out, and the other negative cards as well, like the 8 and 9 of swords, that sort of thing. But that's the devil. I really like that. It reminds me of that the Cook's Tarot with the 8 of swords, how it is in your mind, or it is your own, a prisoner of your own mind, and the devil is somewhat you are imprisoned through your own mind. You are abdicating your control, you are abdicating your free will to something else or someone else. But yeah, so this is her journey to healing, basically. And if you have seen my other videos, a lot of my approach to tarot and a lot of the tarot decks that I like have other people's stories on top of the tarot structure. That's the world going into and so tarot to me is simply, at the moment anyway, at this current point of my journey, tarot is simply a carrier structure, and the real meat for me is people's stories that sits on top of it. And so this kind of tarot deck for me becomes quite This is Ten of Swords, because Roxy's own journey, Roxy's own emotional journey, and becoming and rebirth and transformation is all over this deck. Her story of coming out of that grief, of coming out of struggling with her health, and a lot of us have experienced similar loss to one degree or another. And I just found such power in other people's strength, in other people's stories, in other people's journey. And so the tarot infrastructure in itself, to me, would not be as empowering, perhaps, without these stories of others that I see on top of it. I mean, look at the Ace of Cups. That's the Six of Cups. I found, as usual, the major arcana to be much more interesting, or much more profound for me personally. And so I just love it. This is one of my favorite ever card. Yin and yang, rather than human male, human female joining hand, although human male, human female joining together is one manifestation of the yin and yang principle, but I just think that the Lovers is so much more than that. And so the fact that this is like a couple of trees intertwined together, even though the more masculine face there and the more feminine face there, it's just less. Yeah, it captures the vastness more. It captures more the vastness of what the Lovers card is all about, at least the way I see it. And so, a bit like the Mary L, but this is, of course, it feels like more down to earth, although not less profound. The Mary L has a lot of theme of duality, birth, of reconciliation within oneself, of the tension that is often seen in the pattern of the world, and that sense of unity that I think instinctively we all know is our natural state. So it's very, very high up in its abstraction level. Here it just feels more earthy, it feels more down to earth. It is as deep and as contemplative, but it is more, you have a lot of symbols here, very rich in symbolism as well, but the symbols very, very earthbound, like fruit and pearls and wood and, trees and waters and sea and ponds and mountains and leaves, animals, that very earthy. Very, very. I probably wouldn't do like a Celtic cross with this, and there are decks and then there are decks, right? So it depends on your approach to tarot. It depends on how you use your deck. It depends on your style of reading. It depends on how you read. Do you read for others? Do you read for yourself? And if you read for others or yourself, do you use it more for spiritual counseling? Do you use it more for predictive reading? And so it might work for you, it might not, but from the point of view of how I use this, which is very much 1 to 3 card draws, very much like the Within Without Advice tag that's been going around all March with the Mary L, and other decks that people use to dive deep into their psyche. This is that sort of a deck. This is not a fast talk deck. This is more of a one-to-one deep conversation type of deck. Look at death. Goes from this world into that world. So yeah, can you say that this is making pretty a gloomy card? Can you say that this makes unnecessarily cheerful what should be a dark card? Well, let me remind you, if I may, that she's lost her child. She was hit by a really substantial health problem, and then she lost a parent. Whether it was parent-in-law or parent, it's still pretty, it's three significant deaths in her family, physical death. And so I don't think we can argue that someone who painted all this as a course of her healing, of coming out of, crawling out of that dark hole, I can't say how you could say that someone like her would make light of death. So my point is that I think it's always useful to go beyond the superficial. The coloring is cheerful, there's no skeleton, it doesn't look like on first glance like it's dark, but this is the depiction of death from someone who's gone through three mortal crises in very short succession within a very short period of time. And so her shop is on Great Game Crafter. You can Google Pearls of Wisdom. I personally believe that the bronze jumbo is probably the best way to go because of it's just, I don't know how you can see the picture clearer with anything smaller than that, unless your deck is a complementary deck, so you have a jumbo one that you get to know the deck with, and then the poker size is just for once you really know the deck, so you don't have to examine the artwork too much. And I believe that this particular booklet, The Complete Wisdom, is sufficient there. With the silver and the gold packages, you have a variety of other trimmings, and I can't remember what they are, but you can check them out on her site, at her site on the Graham, with the Graham Crafter. And so it's color coded as well. Here it's a bit more summarized, I suppose. Not necessarily more succinct, but it's definitely a more summarized form, I feel, compared to the second edition. But it's kind of besides the point anyway, because I don't believe this is available anymore. I'm not sure. And so even if it's available, just make sure that Roxi hasn't been in any way, her right hasn't been, as a creator, hasn't been violated by anybody, because that's by the 7th house. So that's the Pearls of Wisdom. I highly recommend it. Actually, it may not be for everyone. That's the caveat. But the way I've been using them, it's a highly unique deck. Thumbs up. Bye.